guys. Okay, so I thought that you had been, I don't even know if you've been able to still do your sleuth and solves for read aloud, but that's what I've been putting on your plans. But I feel like your sleuth and solves are running out, or you may have already run out of them. I'm not sure. So I thought that I could get the Ickabog brought to me. Mrs. G brought it to me. She was so kind. And I thought that I could read it aloud to you guys, just a little bit every day, and then you can see my face, and I wish I could see your face, but this is the best that I can do for now. I'm feeling a little bit better, so I'm hoping that I can come back so soon, hopefully in just a few days or maybe a week or two, so I'll be back soon enough. I will say Gus is right behind the iPad. Okay, he just jumped down. He will probably make an appearance, and if not, I'll get him and I'll show him. Actually, he's right here, so I might be able to get him right now. Let's see. Okay, I got him. Here we go. Here we go. Here's Gus. He is now like 20 pounds. He's very big. I'll show you how big he is. He's giant. I'm stretching him out. And I don't know if you can see, he's big, very, very big. He likes me being homesick because he's been able to help take care of me. But anyway, okay, that was a long introduction. So I'm going to get started. I will say it's a little bit weird that I am just reading to you and you're just looking at me in my like sheep robe. But oh well. I also feel like I'm a famous author that's like doing a read aloud for people. So I'm also in my house. I'll give you a little background. Here's my house. I have frames and a light that's right above my head that makes this very bad lighting, but oh well. And then the coolest thing about this setup, I'll show you, is the blanket that I have on me. I got this for my wedding, and it has pictures of me and Brian all over it. So, yeah, this is me and Brian in high school. That is me and Brian when we got engaged. This is in high school as well. This is when we were 14 years old here, and then that's when we were engaged. So anyway, this is cool. This is my favorite blanket because I've never had a blanket with my face on it before. But anyway, okay, I'm gonna start reading. So it's been a really long time since we read the Ickabog, like I think 2 months. So I'm going to refresh. Actually, it might have been before I went homesick. I don't remember. But to refresh your memory, Bert just met up with Roderick Roach, who was being weird and crying because his dad died, unfortunate, and then they got taken captive and they're now at Ma Grunter's orphanage. So I think it was Basher John got them and took them, and now they're in Ma Grunter's orphanage. And if you remember, somebody else is in Ma Grunter's orphanage, and that is Daisy. And at the same time, because we're going to be in chapter 47 now, which is called Down in the Dungeons, and this is the picture. This is drawn by Advika, age 9. So we're in the dungeons for this chapter, and in the dungeons we have Daisy's father. He's the carpenter, he's stuck in the dungeons, and then Bert's mother, she's the pastry chef, she's in the dungeons too. Okay, also if you guys want to be underneath your desks, if you haven't been doing that, you can totally get underneath your desks or stand up, whatever's most comfortable for you. Okay, this one is a short chapter. We'll see. I think you only have like 15 minutes for read aloud today, so we'll see how far we get. Okay, Down in the Dungeons. The kitchen workers in the palace were most surprised to hear from Lord Spittleworth that Mrs. Beamish had requested her own separate kitchen because she was so much more important than they were. Indeed, some of them were suspicious because Mrs. Beamish had never been stuck up in all the years they'd known her, because remember, she was like, I require all these wonderful things to keep going, which is her really just trying to stay alive. Okay. However, as her cakes and pastries were still appearing regularly at the king's table, they knew she was alive, wherever she was, and like many of their fellow countrymen, the servants decided it was safest not to ask questions. Meanwhile, life in the palace dungeons had been utterly transformed. A stove had been fitted in Mrs. Beamish's cell. Her pots and pans had been brought down from the kitchens, and the prisoners in neighboring cells had been trained up to help her perform the different tasks that went into producing the featherlight pastries that made her the best baker in the kingdom. So now all those starving people who were just prisoners in the cells are now actually having a purpose, and they're helping her. She demanded the doubling of the prisoners' rations to make sure they were strong enough to whisk and fold, to measure and weigh, to sift and pour, and a rat catcher to clean the place of vermin, and a servant to run between the cells, handing out different implements through the bars. So she's helped a lot in the conditions in the dungeon. So to show you again, this is her with her all of the things that are in her cell now, which is a pretty good setup. The heat from the stove dried out the damp walls. Delicious smells replaced the stench of mold and dank water. Mrs. Beamish insisted that each of the prisoners had to taste a finished cake so that they understood the results of their efforts. Slowly, the dungeon started to be a place of activity, even of cheerfulness, and prisoners who'd been weak and starving before Mrs. Beamish arrived were gradually fattening up. In this way, she kept busy and tried to distract herself from her worries about Bert. All the time the rest of the prisoners baked, Mr. Dovetail sang the national anthem, and he kept carving giant Ickabog feet in the cell next door. His singing and banging had enraged the other prisoners before Mrs. Beamish arrived, but now she encouraged everyone to join in with him. The sound of all the prisoners singing the national anthem drowned out the perpetual noises of his hammer and chisel, and the best of it was that when Spittleworth ran down into the dungeons to tell them to stop making such a racket, Mrs. Beamish said innocently that surely it was treason to stop people from singing the national anthem. Spittleworth looked foolish at that, and all the prisoners bellowed with laughter. With a leap of joy, Mrs. Beamish thought she heard a weak, wheezy chuckle from the cell next door. So remember, Mr. Dovetail's not doing anything but singing the national anthem constantly. So he's laughing now, which is a good sign. Mrs. Beamish might not have known much about madness, like craziness, but she knew how to rescue things that seemed spoiled, like curdled sauces and falling souffles. She believed Mr. Dovetail's broken mind might yet be mended, if only he could be brought to understand that he wasn't alone and to remember who he was. And so, every now and then, Mrs. Beamish would suggest songs other than the national anthem, trying to jolt Mr. Dovetail's poor mind into a different course, which might bring him back to himself. And at last, to her amazement and joy, she heard him joining in with the Ickabog drinking song, which had been popular even in the days long before the monster was thought to be real. So this is the drinking song. I drank a single bottle, and the Ickabog's a lie. I drank another bottle, and I thought I heard it sigh. And now I've drunk another. I can see it slinking by. The Ickabog is coming, so let's drink before we die. Setting down the tray of cakes she'd just taken out of the stove, Mrs. Beamish jumped onto her bed and spoke softly through the crack in the high wall. Daniel Dovetail, I heard you singing that silly song. It's Bertha Beamish here, your old friend. Remember me? We used to sing that a long time ago when the children were tiny. My Bert and your Daisy. Do you remember that, Dan? She waited for a response, and in a little while she thought she heard a sob. You may think this strange, but Mrs. Beamish was glad to hear Mr. Dovetail cry, because tears can heal a mind, as well as laughter. And that night, for many nights afterward, Mrs. Beamish talked softly to Mr. Dovetail through the crack in the wall, and after a while he began to talk back. Mrs. Beamish told Mr. Dovetail how terribly she regretted telling the kitchen maid what she said about the Ickabog, and Mr. Dovetail told her how wretched he'd felt afterwards for suggesting that Major Beamish had fallen off his horse. And each promised the other that their child was alive, because they had to believe it, or die. A freezing chill was now stealing into the dungeons through its one high, tiny, barred window. The prisoners could tell a hard winter was approaching, yet the dungeon had become a place of hope and healing. Mrs. Beamish demanded more blankets for all of her helpers and kept her stove burning all night, determined that they would survive. Okay, so we're going to stop there, but the next chapter is chapter 48, which is Bert and Daisy Find Each Other, which is hopefully going to be a good chapter. I'm excited. So I'm excited that we're doing this now, and hopefully this will just be for a few more days. But also, I wanted to say when Miss G dropped off the book, she dropped off your guys' birthday cards for me, and that really made me so happy. I really appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time to make those of you that made them and sent them. It made me feel really, really good and really happy, especially some of your drawings. Like, I'm thinking Lydia's, like, dragon, and a lot of other ones were very sweet, so thank you so much. Okay, it's Friday. I hope you guys have a great day. Last day of Catholic Schools Week, and as I was making up your schedule, I was thinking how fun of a day you have today. So you have like an hour and a half worth of study hall and everything. So you guys, everybody has a math quiz today, both classes, so good luck in that. You're gonna do great. And I hope you guys have a safe weekend, and I will see you guys in this video next week. I love you all. Goodbye. Happy Friday.